The meal had been started very early, and everything was prepared, but when my parents suggested going to church, I adamantly refused. Everybody else went, but there was no way I could handle that situation, something about deceit or feeling exposed. It gave me a little more time to get ready, as the green dress and all its accessories were difficult for unprepared fingers, but I was ready when they returned. The dress covering the corset and stockings, while the makeup book had been followed carefully, and then the chains and ring were placed in their correct positions. I stood on my heels as I greeted them back home and served them with sherry or soda. The day continued like so many other feasts. We ate and drank, played with the games, slept, and chatted. Only I had the added interest of a skirt that looked great when I stood, but seemed to expand when I sat, and all the net went upwards, needing to brush it down, a diverting amusement to me, and at times the others. Eventually, we all went to bed and slept well into the next day. On Boxing Day, there was an anticlimax. Jill and Angela both took their families to their parents and left me with my parents. It was quiet, and we cleared up the house together. I spent some time reading and taking in the books I had been given, with a little experimentation added for fun. Neil rang to see if I wanted to go out that evening, and I came back to the reality that I was only playing and accepted. In getting ready for the transformation into Lawrence and the change in the garage, I felt a tinge of deceit towards my mother and a sadness that the fun of the holiday was over. But a drink with the lads would be good. I spent the rest of the day at Neil's or the pub, sneaking back in late to avoid upsetting my mother. The rest of the winter break I expected to continue in the same vein. I would be Lauren at home to please my mother, and Lawrence went out so as to be myself. I did take time off studying to check the books Angela had given me, and at times you might find me trying to simulate a walk or stance described, or playing with colors around my eyes, only in the interest of theater and trying to play a proper part in the home. My mother says she never brought me up to wear trousers, so why should I start now I was a student? Being a student did not mean going scruffy, and in the situation I was in, I obliged by doing as many girly things as I could. There were two notable breaks from this norm, one fun, the other rather frightening. The fun one came at New Year. Jill and Bruce had tickets to a party, and Jill was called in to cover at work, as nearly everybody else on the ward was sick. This created a situation where Bruce had a spare ticket and wanted to know if I would like to go. Of course, I did not, but Jill offered to lend me the green dress. Bruce would be a gentleman and pay all night. The alternative was midnight with my parents and the TV. Bruce did not wait for an answer. Rather, he just told me to be ready in 15 minutes, and he would pick me up. Sure enough, he was on time, then told my mother why he was there. She said it was a wonderful idea. Rather unnerving me by coming to help me collect a few things, she wanted to know what I would be wearing, and gave me advice on how to behave. I bundled my bits into a bag and really wanted to sneak out and change, but that was not going to happen with my mother watching. I tried a couple of diversions, but she did not take the hint. I was left with no choice. I had to step outside in the daylight and travel in Bruce's car to his house wearing a pink top and black skirt. Feeling very exposed being outside, I checked nobody was about, then made a dash for the car and sat well down in the car, hoping the neighbors were not looking. Bruce was very kind and took a quiet route but teased me about my performance. He tried to convince me I looked fine. I begged to differ. Jill was going on duty at 9, so was able to make sure I was perfect before she went on duty. I wore the green dress with its tight bodice and layered net skirts again. I felt able to do my own makeup, using bolder colors than Angela had done at Christmas. Jill styled my hair. Then, with my jewelry in place, I was ready. Bruce had a very smart suit on, looking a gentleman. So Jill saw us off at 8, and we drove a good half hour, most of which I spent keeping the skirt out of the driver's way. Once there, I realized this might be foolish. Last time I had been out, it was in a group. Now, I was alone with my brother. Nervously, I followed him into the hotel reception and was shown to the function room. Bruce introduced me as his sister, Lauren. It sounded funny to hear it in these surroundings, but I let Bruce do the talking. It transpired he knew a few people there and chatted quite happily, while I said I had a sore throat and kept quiet. There was a buffet dinner, plenty of wine, then a dance with 1 or 2 silly games. At midnight, we all cheered and sang, then carried on dancing. Most of the dancing was old-time stuff to suit the majority. Luckily, we had all been taught waltzes, etc., as children, so as long as I concentrated on being the woman, we managed very well. Being held closely was a new experience. Bruce had somehow managed to switch his responses to me, so I was a sister and not a brother. He held me close in the dances, would gently guide me with a hand on my waist as we went to dance. As a boy, we hardly ever touched. I was surprised that he did it and that I liked the attention. By about 2, I was getting tired, and the corset was pinching, so we left. He was full of it all the way home, how nobody realized I was not a real sister, how well I danced, how good I looked. I tried to return compliments, but he made sure I took the credit. Then, when we got home, I had to ask him to help undo the dress. He then saw the corset and stockings, uttering something like, "Wow." He just stood and stared. If Jill had been dressed like that, we would have been home long ago. Do you realize how great you look? And that's knowing the truth about my little brother. I told him to leave it and help undo the corset. I think he went to bed a little shocked. I went to bed tired and wondering how I'd get home the next day. Jill came home about 10, and we were just about getting up. "You should have borrowed a nightie," Jill said as I came out of the bathroom in a dressing gown I had found. Then, over breakfast, Jill wanted to know every detail. She smiled as we talked, asking about some people I didn't know. I felt worried enough to insist they would not say anything to anyone, even to shock them. In the whole conversation, one statement left its mark. Bruce said it, but Jill agreed. "I never noticed before, but with no makeup, you still look feminine. You have mother's looks and build." I knew you were not a rugby player like me and Phil, but I could go as far as pretty. Jill wanted some sleep, so I dressed and Bruce took me home, hoping again the neighbors wouldn't be looking. The frightening event happened when I had relaxed into my regular routine. When the door rang, I would make myself scarce, but if you relax too much, you get caught out. It was the next-door neighbor, Mrs. Price, who caught me. I was eating lunch, engrossed in a book, when they walked in. My mother had met her outside and invited her in. I was now unable to escape, especially when my mother said, "Lauren, be a dear and put the kettle on." I looked at Mrs. Price and she at me, then smiled. "Nice to see you, Lauren." I mumbled some response and went as bid. Mother left us together for a few minutes and Mrs. Price approached me. "I wondered what your mother was saying." I thought she was confused. "Do I call you Lauren or Lawrence?" "I am right, aren't I?" I felt there was no other way but to be honest. I told her Lauren was for Mother's sake and that it was not for me. She explained how Mother had been talking about a daughter, and that had confused most people because everybody knew she had sons, and it was known Lawrence was about. She then wanted to know how Mother was and would her condition improve? She herself had noticed changes in her, but did not know her well enough to understand the history of the problem. Then, to my surprise, she complimented me on my appearance and told me she had not recognized me at first. I was flattered, but asked her to keep it a secret, which I think she did to her credit. She might be nosy, but not a gossip, thankfully. That was a particularly worrying moment, and I must have gone pale as Mrs. Price found me. More worrying, though, was the fear of friends finding out about my new style of dress. They might not be so sympathetic towards the situation. I had a week left until term started, and it seemed like an age. I was hiding at home and not going out just in case someone said something. So it was a relief to leave home. I left all the dresses and underwear behind and thought of the ease life would offer being able to be Lawrence all the time. But I found myself thinking about the parties and the textures and sensations of the clothes and confused myself as I did not know how I should feel. I had done it for Mother and I hoped she would recover, but I had grown comfortable in the female role and now missed it. There was no outlet in the drama course. Boys were not expected to play female roles, as in all-male schools or centuries ago, so I lived as a man until Easter. Easter and summer holidays. The return home was full of anxiety. I had spoken on the phone to family members, and they told me Mother still called me Lauren, but I was optimistic and hoped to have things as they were. This hope was shattered when my father picked me up from the station and asked if I would mind calling at Bruce's so I could change before going home. Nothing had changed, so I agreed, as long as he got a doctor to see my mother. My life would be as restricted as it had been last holiday. At least I would get the studying done. I was also anxious that the more I lived like this, the more chance of another Mrs. Price-type incident happening, and that would not be good for anyone, I felt. Even with all these negative sides to being at home, I did like being with Mother. She was lovely, and strangely, I enjoyed the clothes and the role she was making me take on. I was still relieved when we had a visit from a doctor, not our GP, but Father said he was someone referred to by our GP. I accepted this and met the man in our home. He wished to see my mother and talk to her without her feeling she was seeing a doctor. He would also like to see me and how she reacted to me. I felt this would help move things back to a normal life. He came and had lunch with us, spending time talking to Mother. He found out things I never knew. There had been a miscarriage of a girl, which would have been her first child. Afterward, with each son, she had hoped for a girl, and when I was not one, she could not handle it. By the time my memory starts, she was over the depression, and I just accepted her the way she was. Now, my physical presence had gone for long enough that her reality now included a girl. Somehow, her mind had flipped me into what she hoped I had been. Once he had seen her, he asked to see me alone. He explained the above, then asked how I felt. There were 3 options. One was to try and treat Mother psychiatrically, which would mean drugs and time at a hospital for assessments. He was not confident Mother's reality could be brought into agreement with mine, and the drugs may affect her in other ways. Option 2 was to be Lawrence. This would mean that she would reject me, and I would not be able to see her as a son, as she would be hostile if I insisted on being known as her son. Then I would need counseling and somewhere else to live. Option 3, he felt, I had already taken. That was to meet her reality with a change of appearance by me. This I knew held risks for me, but he went over them again. As he recapped, I did wonder whose side he was on. We could drug Mother, I could be rejected as a son, possibly permanently, or I could fit in with her reality, even if it is different from mine. The choice was mine. If I left, I'd see a counselor, but if I stayed, he could put me in touch with people used to helping cope with changing gender. But he always referred to me as Lauren and said he thought I was a girl when we first met, so I was not to dismiss the last option on the grounds of it not being physically practical. I could almost tell which choice he favored, and he was not on Lawrence's side. A couple of days later, I decided on shock treatment for Mother. She saw me naked. I did it deliberately, but all she said was to comment on how little my breast had developed and ignored my genitals. Which is not hard, as there isn't much there anyway, but I hoped they might provoke a response like, "Oh, what is that? You are a boy." But nothing happened. Even physical truth could not invade her reality. It was the final hope I had of getting back to being a son. Now I only had 2 choices, to leave or fit her image of me. I spent time with Bruce and Jill, and then went to see Phil and Angela before going back to college. Nobody had an answer, except that Father would finance everything and they would accept my decision either way. But there was a feeling that as Lauren, I would still be part of the complete family, whereas as Lawrence, somehow the family would be broken. So, with all this, I went back to my studies and hoped for someone else or something else to precipitate an answer, instead of it all being down to me. In looking for an answer, I found a postponement. I was offered a summer job in a theater near Phil's, which I took and stayed with them. But I didn't need to go home at the beginning of the holiday to drop my study things off, and accepted the now normal role-swapping procedure. While I was there, Father said they felt it was time to redecorate my room, as it was still a little boy's room, the same as 10 years ago. He said it would only be painted, so if I didn't like it, I could easily repaint it. I agreed without thinking. So, when I returned for a week before the second year started, I found a room painted in blue and yellow pastels, with matching drapes, no curtains, new bedding, and a dressing table with a stool, by the side of a big cheval mirror. It was a girl's room. If I had thought, I would have seen it coming, but I did not object. I had come to the acceptance that I wanted to be with my mother, and if this was the way to do it without hurting her, then I would be her little girl. How I would cope long-term, I was not sure, as there was no way we could keep it secret forever. As if to underline that, Mrs. Price called round, and I stayed instead of running upstairs. The future would have to be considered, but not yet, I hoped. Second Christmas holiday. I went away for a term of being a lad, little knowing what was brewing for me back at home. Father picked me up from the station in December, and we went to Bruce's so I could change, as I expected. It was the welcome at home. I knew about the decorating, but my room now had a fragrance to it, and an overall feminine feel, and it didn't feel wrong, which surprised me. A more worrying event happened after I left in the summer. Neil had called to borrow a book I had told him about. He asked for Lawrence first, and was blanked by Mother. When he mentioned this to his mother, she suggested asking for Lauren, and hey presto, he was in, and she found him the book. The effect of this was felt when I met Neil a day after coming home. I had sneaked out and had been around at his house for a while when the subject came up. He caught me unawares with his questions. He wanted to know why I always came to his house or the pub, never inviting anyone home, why I was behaving oddly, and why he had to refer to me as Lauren to get the book. This was the first time I had really been confronted by the dual role I now had. I must have blushed then gone white as I thought what to say, deny or be honest. Neil had known me since junior school, and he sensed my distress. We had always been a couple of gentle souls, not for the rough and tough, and we were used to being teased and bullied and understanding the other. Now that bond showed. He went to make a drink whilst he left me to rally my thoughts. Denial I discounted, as he already had strong suspicions something was odd, so I went with the "can you keep a secret" line, which I knew he could. I told him almost everything about Mother, about the lines I had crossed on the way, and a little of how I felt. He sat taking it all in, prompting as necessary. Then, when he sensed I had finished, he asked if he could call and meet Lauren. I was reluctant at first, but he persuaded me to go home, and he would call an hour later. This was a worrying hour. I had difficulty deciding what to wear and how much makeup. In the end, I chose the stretchy red tartan skirt and polo jumper with light makeup, but enough to emphasize the fact there was makeup and a pair of heeled shoes. I was still fussing when he called. He asked for Lauren. Mother said how nice it was to see him and why he did not come round any more. Then she called me. I met him in the hall and took him to the lounge. His face was a picture, total disbelief. He swore if he had seen me outside, he would not have recognized me. Later, I decided to show him my newly decorated room for his opinion. He approved of the colors and said it suited me, and then, fortunately, he had to go. That was enough for one day. It had been quite stressful, and I retreated to my room to find some peace. Neil was now full of his newfound secret. He rang and asked if he could call. He wanted to ask me some questions. I could not retreat now and waited for him with a sinking heart, wondering where this might lead, and just when I thought I had got my head sorted out as well. What he wanted was to see if his eyes had let him down, but he was again stunned, his word at how good I looked. Then he wanted to know everything about how the clothes felt, how I felt, how the role felt, how long the secret double life would continue. Finally, he asked if I was comfortable and enjoying the role. I tried to be honest as far as I understood the answers myself. Then he said he wanted to prove to me how good I looked, that I was not a grotesque man in a skirt. He insisted he call that evening to take me into town to a bar both of us knew but were not known in. I wished I could have said no, but he was so keen, and I wanted to know if I was able to go out dressed. I spent ages dressing. I was immaculate, having done everything I could think of at least once. He pulled up in his mother's car and had made an effort himself. It took a tremendous effort to leave the front door as I was shaking so much, but his enthusiasm never waned. He took my arm and led me to the car. I remembered the times out with my brothers and knew I had coped well then, so I could again. The cold air was fresh on my legs, making the car very cozy. When we arrived, after a half-hearted attempt to change Neil's mind, we left the car and walked to the bar. I said if anyone as much as stared at me, I was off. We found a quiet corner, Neil bought us drinks, and I waited to be stared at or someone to make a comment. After an hour, I was enticed out of the corner and into another bar, then into a club where we could dance, but I had difficulty thinking of dancing with my best friend. In the end, we left for home. Neil had won. People had looked, but no more than Neil or I looked at other people. Neil insisted people always look at a pretty girl, so it would be strange if nobody had looked, and I agreed he was right. For the first time, I accepted I looked like a pretty girl. That was another line crossed, acceptance that I looked fine and not a freak. The week before Christmas was a usual mix of sneaking out to do shopping or see friends, but now Neil knew, and he would call, and twice entice me out in the evening for another drink in town. The buzz from going out with Neil was very nice, and Neil seemed to like the recklessness of being with me. I supposed we liked being different and daring people to challenge us, except the last thing we wanted was to be challenged. If we were ever suspected, we would have run a mile. As the family would gather for Christmas Day, I did wonder what would happen when Phil and Angela arrived. They had not seen me dressed for a year. How would they take it? I need not have worried. They could see Mother as well, and upon questioning realized I was fine as well. We decided to go out again on Christmas Eve. Only after Neil called, he got invited as well. It was amusing to see his face when my niece called me Auntie Lauren.